Rear Admiral Vernon Haskell commanded every room he entered, not through presence, but through the careful accumulation of favors owed. He stood at the front of the secondary briefing room, silver hair immaculate, dress whites crisp enough to cut glass, walking the assembled officers through Trident Forge objectives with the practiced ease of a man who had briefed senators and survived. His voice carried the particular confidence of someone who had never been shot at, but had approved the budgets of those who had. Lonnie stood at the back of the room, tablet in hand, watching. She had arrived early, positioned herself where she could observe without being observed. The other analysts clustered near the door, ready to be dismissed. She stayed still. Haskell spoke about interoperability, about metrics, about the importance of joint training in an evolving threat environment. The SEALs in the front row maintained expressions of polite attention, while their eyes said what their mouths could not. Another admiral who had never tasted sand or smelled cordite, lecturing warriors about war. But Lonnie watched something else. She watched how Haskell's aide, Senior Chief Renfro, scanned the room every 40 seconds. She watched how Haskell's hand moved to his collar whenever he mentioned equipment procurement. She watched how his smile tightened at the corners when a Marine Raider captain asked about body armor specifications. The question was innocent. The captain had no way of knowing. But Lonnie saw Haskell's micro-expression, the flash of something cold and controlled before the smooth answer rolled out. New generation ceramic plates, rigorous testing protocols, full confidence in the procurement process. She thought about 4 men who had trusted that process. 4 men whose ceramic plates had cracked like dinner china when the rounds punched through. The briefing ended. Officers filed out, conversations already turning to the evening's training schedule. Haskell worked the room, shaking hands, remembering names, playing the political game that had carried him further than combat ever could. Then his eyes found her. The recognition was instant. 6 months of buried reports and reassigned investigators. 6 months of emails marked classified and meetings that never appeared on official calendars. And here she stood in his briefing room like a ghost he thought he had exorcised. Haskell smiled, the smile of a man who had already won. He crossed the room, with Renfro trailing behind, and Lonnie felt the shift in attention as other personnel registered that a flag officer was approaching support staff. This did not happen. Admirals did not seek out chief petty officers for conversation. Chief Kasongo, Haskell said, and his voice carried just far enough for nearby officers to hear. I was not aware you had been assigned to Trident Forge. Intelligence Analysis Support, Admiral. Standard rotation. His smile remained fixed. I see. I will need to review the personnel assignments. Given the classified nature of certain briefings, we should ensure everyone present has appropriate clearances. The implication hung in the air. Lonnie met his eyes and held them. My clearances are current, Admiral. TS/SCI with all relevant compartments. Of course. Haskell's tone suggested the opposite. But with sensitive joint operations, one can never be too careful. I will have my staff conduct a routine verification. Standard procedure. It was not standard procedure. Everyone within earshot knew it. Renfro smirked, and Lonnie felt the weight of a system designed to protect men like Haskell and crush anyone who threatened them. Understood, Admiral. He turned away, dismissing her existence, returning to his natural habitat of handshakes and political positioning. Lonnie remained still for 3 counted breaths, then gathered her tablet and walked out. Master Chief Whitmore stood in the corridor, close enough to have heard. His expression revealed nothing, but he watched Haskell through the doorway with the particular attention of a man cataloging threats. That was unusual, he said. Lonnie kept walking. Yes, Master Chief. He fell in a step beside her, his presence both protection and interrogation. Admirals do not typically concern themselves with analyst clearances. No, Master Chief. They do not. She did not offer more, and he did not press, but she felt his curiosity like a physical weight. In 22 years of service, Whitmore had developed instincts that kept operators alive. Those instincts were telling him something about Yolanda Kasongo did not fit the file. Lonnie returned to her temporary workspace, a borrowed desk in the intelligence section, and pulled up the evening training schedule. Her hands were steady. Her breathing was even. Inside, the memory she had spent 6 months trying to bury clawed its way back to the surface. She had been in the Tactical Operations Center when the call came in. Yemen. DevGru element in contact. For operators down. The audio had been chaos, gunfire and screaming, and a voice she recognized shouting for medevac that would arrive too late. The after-action report landed on her desk 3 days later. She read it once, then twice, then pulled the equipment logs and cross-referenced and followed the trail that no one else had bothered to follow. Defective body armor. Ceramic plates from Aegis Defense Solutions that had passed inspection despite documented failures. A procurement officer who had flagged the issue and been quietly transferred. She had written her report, filed it through proper channels, waited for the investigation that never came. Instead, Rear Admiral Vernon Haskell had appeared in her chain of command. Her report had vanished into classification limbo. Her next performance evaluation had contained unexpected criticisms. Her security clearance had been flagged for routine review. Now she sat at a borrowed desk at Coronado, and the man who had buried 4 murders was planning to sign a contract for more defective equipment. Her tablet chirped. New message encrypted. She opened it. Aegis Defense Solutions contract approval scheduled for tomorrow, 0800. Building 624 joint briefing. Admiral Haskell presiding. Attendance list attached. She scrolled through the names. Every senior officer at Trident Forge would be present. The perfect audience for a rubber stamp approval that would put more operators in coffins with cracked ceramic plates. 18 hours. She had 18 hours to find proof that could not be buried, witnesses that could not be silenced, a way to make the truth so public that even Vernon Haskell could not make it disappear. Her tablet showed a photo she kept in a locked folder. 4 faces. For men who had trusted their equipment and their chain of command and died because both had failed them. She closed the folder and began to plan. The base gym at 0430 held only the dedicated and the desperate. Lonnie moved through her routine in the corner, away from the cluster of SEALs working the weights with the competitive energy of men who measured themselves against each other in everything. She kept her movements controlled, unremarkable. A support staffer maintaining fitness standards. Nothing more. But when a barbell slipped from a rack and fell toward a distracted petty officer, Lonnie caught it one-handed without breaking stride. The weight was significant. Her grip did not waver. She set it back on the rack and continued toward the door as if nothing had happened. The petty officer stared after her. One of the SEALs, a lieutenant she recognized from the briefing, watched with sudden interest. She felt his attention and ignored it, disappearing into the pre-dawn darkness before questions could form. Renfro was waiting outside her quarters when she returned. He leaned against the wall with the casual menace of a man who enjoyed having power over others. His size filled the narrow corridor, blocking the path to her door without technically blocking anything. Early morning, Chief, he said. Could not sleep. Physical training, Senior Chief. Maintaining readiness. His smile suggested he knew something she did not. The Admiral asked me to inform you that your security clearance review has been expedited. You will need to report to the personnel office at 0700 for verification. That would keep her tied up through the morning briefings. Away from the intelligence section. Away from the files she needed to access. Understood, she said. I will report as ordered. Renfro studied her face, looking for fear or frustration. She gave him nothing. After a moment, he pushed off the wall and walked away, satisfied that the message had been delivered. Lonnie entered her quarters and sat on the edge of the rack. She had 3 hours before the personnel office opened. 3 hours to find what she needed before Haskell's net closed around her completely. She showered and dressed in 4 minutes, then moved through the base with the purposeful invisibility of someone who belonged everywhere and nowhere. The intelligence section was locked, but she had legitimate access codes. The classified terminals required biometric verification, which she provided. Every action documented, every login tracked. She was not hiding. She was working. The files on Aegis Defense Solutions were buried deep but burial implied someone had done the burying. She followed the digital trail backward through procurement records and inspection reports and correspondence chains that had been marked classified after the fact. Someone had been thorough. Someone had known exactly which documents to hide and how to make them disappear. But whoever had sanitized these files had made one mistake. They had focused on the official channels, the formal reports, the documented communications. They had not thought to check the backup servers that automatically archived email metadata. The emails themselves were gone. The content had been scrubbed, but the metadata remained. Sender, recipient, timestamp, subject line. A skeleton of the conversation that had been erased. Admiral Vernon Haskell to Director of Procurement, subject line, Aegis ceramic plate testing concerns. Sent 3 weeks before Yemen. Follow-up email 2 days later, same participants, subject line, Aegis ceramic plate testing concerns resolved. Resolved. For men dead, because someone had resolved testing concerns by ignoring them. She copied the metadata to her personal device, encrypted it twice, and logged out of the terminal exactly as protocol required. The evidence was thin, circumstantial. A defense attorney would tear it apart. But it was a thread, and threads could be pulled. The corridor outside the intelligence section held an unexpected presence. Lieutenant Commander Petra Solheim stood reviewing documents on a tablet, her JAG insignia catching the overhead lights. She looked up as Lonnie emerged. Chief Kasongo. Early start. Yes, ma'am. Intelligence support requires flexibility. Solheim's eyes were sharp, assessing. She had the look of someone who noticed details that others missed. I understand Admiral Haskell has expressed concerns about your clearances. News traveled fast. Administrative review, ma'am. Standard procedure. Solheim's expression suggested she recognized the lie for what it was. If you need legal counsel regarding any personnel matters, my office is available. That is also standard procedure. The offer hung between them, weighted with implication. Lonnie filed it away. Thank you, ma'am. I will keep that in mind. She made it to the personnel office at 0658, 2 minutes early, and spent the next 3 hours answering questions she had answered a dozen times before. The petty officer conducting the review was apologetic and thorough, clearly uncomfortable with the irregularity of an expedited clearance verification for someone whose record showed no flags. By the time she emerged, the morning briefings were over. The intelligence section had received and processed the daily updates without her input, and Senior Chief Renfro stood, waiting in the corridor with a look of satisfaction that told her the day was about to get worse. Chief Kasongo. The Admiral requests your presence in Building 624. The contract briefing had been scheduled for 0800. It was now past 1100. Whatever had happened in that room, she had missed it. She followed Renfro across the base, through the security checkpoints, into the building where 47 officers had gathered that morning to approve the next round of equipment procurement. The briefing room was empty now, chairs pushed back, coffee cups abandoned. Haskell stood at the front, reviewing documents with 2 captains she did not recognize. He looked up as she entered. His smile was the smile of a man savoring victory. Chief Kasongo, I wanted to inform you personally. Your intelligence analysis services will no longer be required for Trident Forge. Your clearance review has identified administrative irregularities that require resolution before you can participate in classified briefings. The 2 captains watched with the careful neutrality of officers who understood they were witnessing something ugly but wanted no part of it. May I ask the nature of the irregularities, Admiral? That information is classified pending review. Haskell's tone dripped with false regret. You will be reassigned to administrative support duties until the matter is resolved. I am sure you understand. She understood perfectly. He was boxing her out, cutting her access, ensuring she could not interfere with whatever came next. By the time any review cleared her name, the contracts would be signed and the defective equipment would be on its way to operators who trusted their chain of command. Yes, Admiral, I understand completely. She turned and walked out before he could see her expression. Renfro followed her to the door, close enough to crowd, far enough to claim innocence. The corridor stretched ahead, empty and sterile. She had the evidence on her device, metadata that proved Haskell had known. But metadata was not enough. She needed the actual communications. She needed witnesses. She needed something that could not be buried. Her tablet buzzed. Encrypted message from a sender she did not recognize. She opened it, expecting another blow. Instead, she found a file. An email chain, complete with content, pulled from a private backup server that should not have existed. The sender line read only, "Some of us remember what happened in Yemen." She read the first message, then the second, then the third. Admiral Vernon Haskell, in his own words, ordering the suppression of safety warnings. Acknowledging the risk. Accepting it as the cost of maintaining contractor relationships. She had him. She finally had him. Now she just had to survive long enough to use it. The lockdown order came at 1400. All personnel with intelligence section access were to report for security screening. Someone had breached classified servers. Someone had accessed files that were supposed to be buried so deep they no longer existed. Lonnie sat in her reassigned workspace, a storage closet converted to an administrative desk, and felt the net drawing tighter. She had copied the metadata that morning. Now Haskell knew someone had been looking. He did not know who. Not yet, but the list of suspects was short and her name sat near the top. The email chain from her anonymous source was encrypted on a device small enough to swallow, if necessary. She had learned that trick in places she was not supposed to have been, doing things that did not appear in any official record. The evidence existed. The question was whether she would survive long enough to use it. Her tablet buzzed. Report to Building 624 for security screening. Mandatory. Immediate. She pocketed the device and walked into the afternoon sun. The screening was theater. Security personnel asked questions they already knew the answers to while watching for tells that would betray guilt. Lonnie answered everything with the flat calm of someone who had been interrogated by professionals in windowless rooms where the consequences of failure were measured in blood rather than career setbacks. They found nothing. They had no reason to search her personally, and the device remained where she had hidden it. But Renfro watched from the doorway with the patience of a predator who knew his prey had nowhere to run. Across the base, Master Chief Darnell Whitmore sat in the team room with Lonnie's personnel file open on his screen. The official record was clean. Exemplary evaluations. Steady progression through the ranks. Intelligence analyst assigned to DevGru support for the past 8 years. But the details did not add up. Her deployment history showed assignments to locations that matched DevGru operations, but the timing was wrong. She was listed as rear echelon support during operations where the team room scuttlebutt said something different. Kandahar, 2018. Mosul, 2019. Raqqa, 2020. Names and dates that triggered memories of missions where the official after-action reports told only part of the story. He pulled out his phone and called a teammate who had retired to a contractor position in Virginia. Kasongo, the voice on the other end, said, "Yeah, I remember her. Quiet. Professional. Stayed in the TOC during the Kandahar thing." Whitmore frowned. That matched the file, but something in his gut said otherwise. He called another number. This one took longer to connect, bouncing through secure relays to reach a team sergeant now stationed in Germany. Kasongo? The sergeant's voice carried surprise. She was in the stack in Mosul. I remember because she was the one who cleared the second floor when Torres went down. Moved like she had been doing it her whole life. That did not match the file at all. You sure about that? Master Chief, I watched her put 2 rounds center mass on a guy who came out closet. She saved my life. Yeah, I am sure. Whitmore ended the call and stared at the screen. 2 teammates, 2 completely different accounts of the same woman. One said she stayed in the rear. One said she was in the stack, clearing rooms and taking lives. Either someone was lying, or Yolanda Kasongo was not who her file said she was. He found her in the corridor outside Building 624, walking with the measured pace of someone who had just survived an interrogation. She looked up as he approached, and for a moment he saw something behind her eyes that he recognized. The look of an operator assessing threat and distance and angles of approach. Then it was gone, replaced by the neutral expression of a support staffer addressing as senior enlisted. Master Chief, Chief Kasongo, walk with me. They moved away from the building, away from the security personnel, still processing the lockdown protocols. Whitmore led her toward the water, toward a stretch of beach where conversations could happen without electronic ears. "I made some calls," he said. "About you." She did not react. That was a reaction in itself. Funny thing. One teammate says you stayed in the TOC in Kandahar. Another says you were in the stack in Mosul, putting rounds on target. He stopped walking and turned to face her. Those two things cannot both be true. The silence stretched between them. Waves broke against the shore. Somewhere on the base, Haskell was tightening his grip, preparing the final move that would end her career and bury the truth forever. "What do you want, Master Chief?" "I want to know who you are. I want to know why an admiral is trying to destroy a chief petty officer. And I want to know what the hell is actually going on." She studied his face the way she had studied Haskell's, reading the micro-expressions, calculating trust and risk. What she saw must have satisfied something, because when she spoke again her voice was different. Harder, more direct. "If I tell you, there is no going back. You will know things that could end your career. Things that certain people have killed to keep buried. 4 operators died in Yemen," Whitmore said. "I served with 2 of them. If someone is responsible, I want to know." The decision crystallized in her eyes. She reached into her pocket and removed a device the size of a thumbnail drive. Admiral Haskell knew the body armor was defective. He buried the warnings to protect a contractor connected to his family. 4 men died because he chose his career over their lives. This is the proof. Whitmore took the device. His jaw tightened as the implications settled. "And you? Who are you really?" Before she could answer, her tablet buzzed. She glanced at the screen, and her expression went cold. "Security has issued a detention order. Falsified charges. Unauthorized access to classified materials. When? They're coming for me in 6 hours. The briefing where I can expose him is in 8. Whitmore looked at the device in his hand, then at the woman who had just handed him evidence that could bring down an admiral. "Then we have work to do." The memorial stood at the edge of the compound, a wall of names etched in stone beneath the weight of a California sunset. Lonnie had walked here without deciding to, her feet carrying her to the only place on base where the dead were acknowledged and the living were expected to be silent. She traced the names with her eyes. Operators who had given everything. Men and women whose families had folded flags and answered doors to chaplains and learned to live with absence. The wall held decades of sacrifice, but 4 names were missing. The Yemen operators were not here. Their mission remained classified. Their deaths existed only in redacted reports and encrypted files and the memories of those who had served beside them. The world would never know what they had given, and the man responsible for their deaths was sleeping soundly in officer quarters while planning his next promotion. She thought about the families. Marcus Webb had a daughter who turned 4 the week after he died. Terrence Okonkwo's mother still sent care packages to an address that would never receive them. David Chin's wife was pregnant with twins he would never meet. Alejandro Vega had been 2 months from retirement, planning to open a fishing charter in Florida. For lives, for futures erased, because Vernon Haskell had decided that contractor relationships mattered more than ceramic plates that could stop bullets. The anger had sustained her for 6 months. Now, standing before a memorial that did not include the men she was fighting for, she felt something else. Exhaustion. The weight of carrying a truth that no one wanted to hear. Run, and Haskell wins. Stay, and she would be detained on falsified charges, her credibility destroyed, the evidence dismissed as the ravings of a disgraced analyst. There was no path forward that did not end in defeat. Footsteps on gravel. Whitmore appeared beside her, his bulk a solid presence against the fading light. "Figured I would find you here," he said. She did not turn. "Did you know them?" "Webb, Okonkwo, Chun, Vega." "Chun and Vega were in my first platoon. Good men. The kind you trust with your life because they have already proven they would give theirs. They trusted their equipment. They trusted their chain of command." Whitmore was quiet for a moment. "I have buried a lot of friends, Chief. Some died because the enemy was better. Some died because the mission was impossible. But if any of them died because someone in our own house betrayed them, I need to know. She finally looked at him. The sunset painted his face in shades of amber and shadow, and she saw the same weight in his eyes that she felt in her chest. 22 years of service. 22 years of watching friends die and wondering if it meant anything. The man who sent you those conflicting accounts, she said. The one who saw me in the stack in Mosul. He was not wrong. Whitmore waited. In 2016, a DevGroup commander named Ezekiel Oduya created an unofficial program. He believed that certain operations required capabilities that gender-integrated teams could provide. Infiltration, long-term placement, scenarios where a female operator would have access that men could not achieve. She paused, letting the words settle. He selected 3 women from support positions, women who had already demonstrated aptitude. We went through the full pipeline, unofficially. Same training, same standards. No examens. 2 washed out in the first month. I completed it. Whitmore's expression did not change, but she saw the recalculation happening behind his eyes. Every assumption he had made about her was reshaping itself around this new information. You're telling me you were a DevGroup operator. I am telling you I completed the training and deployed on 23 operations in roles that were never officially acknowledged. I'm telling you that my file is a cover story, and the woman you think you know does not exist. The waves crashed against the shore. Somewhere on the base, security personnel were preparing to execute a detention order that would end her career and bury the truth alongside it. Whitmore let out a breath that might have been a laugh. I have outlasted 6 admirals in my career. Watched them come in with their grand plans and political connections, and watched them leave when the teams chewed them up and spit them out. He turned to face her fully. Haskell is number 7, and he is going to fall harder than any of them. You believe me? I believe that someone who moves like you move, thinks like you think, and keeps secrets like you keep secrets is not a damn analyst. I believe that 4 of my brothers are dead, and the man responsible is signing contracts for more defective gear. And I believe that if you had a way to stop him, you would have done it already without asking for help. She felt something loosen in her chest. For 6 months, she had carried this alone. The weight did not disappear, but it shifted, distributed across shoulders broader than her own. The briefing is at 0800 tomorrow, she said. Haskell will be presenting the new equipment contracts for final approval. Every senior officer at Trident Forge will be present, and you want to walk in there and expose him in front of all of them. It is the only way. Too many witnesses for a cover-up. Too many people who will have heard the truth. Whitmore nodded slowly. That is either the bravest thing I have ever heard or the stupidest. He paused. Probably both. Will you help me? He looked at the memorial wall, at the names of men who had trusted their chain of command and paid the ultimate price. Chief Kasongo, I have been waiting 6 months for someone to give me a target. He met her eyes. Tell me what you need. She told him. The plan was desperate, dependent on timing and luck, and the hope that enough honorable people remained in that briefing room to tip the scales. But it was a plan, and for the first time since Yemen, she was not fighting alone. The sun disappeared beneath the horizon. The memorial wall faded into shadow. In 6 hours, security would come for her. In 8 hours, the briefing would begin. Everything depended on what happened in between. The team room was empty at 2,200, the operators either resting before tomorrow's exercises or running night training evolutions on the beach. Whitmore secured the door and pulled out an encrypted satellite phone that was not issued by the Navy. Lonnie watched him dial a number from memory. The call connected on the 3rd ring. Zeke, Whitmore said, I need confirmation on something sensitive. The voice on the other end was cautious. Darnell, it has been a while. I have a chief petty officer here named Kasongo. She is telling me things that do not match her file. Things about a program you ran in 2016. Silence stretched across the secure connection. Lonnie could not hear the response, but she saw Whitmore's expression shift from questioning to confirmed. She is one of yours, Whitmore said. It was not a question anymore. The conversation continued in fragments she could piece together. Oduya was concerned. The shadow pipeline had never been officially sanctioned. If it became public, careers would end and investigations would begin. But when Whitmore explained the situation, explained Yemen and the defective armor and Haskell's cover-up, the tone changed. Whitmore handed her the phone. "I want to talk to you." Chief Kasongo. Odia's voice carried the weight of a man who had spent decades in the shadows. "Darnell tells me you are about to burn down everything we built. 4 operators are dead because of defective equipment, sir. The man responsible is about to sign contracts for more. I cannot let that happen. And you're willing to expose the program to stop him, if that is what it takes." Another pause. "You understand that if this goes wrong, I cannot protect you. The program does not officially exist. You do not officially exist. Not as an operator." "I understand, sir." When Odia spoke again, his voice was different. Harder. "Then do not let it go wrong. I will make calls tonight. If you need official confirmation of your status tomorrow, it will be available. But Kasongo, you get one shot at this. Make it count." The call ended. Whitmore took the phone back and studied her with new eyes. 23 operations, he said. "How many did I serve on without knowing you were there?" "At least 4. He shook his head slowly. "I thought I knew everyone in the stack. Every operator, every support element. And you were right there the whole time. That was the point, Master Chief. If you had known, the program would have failed." He accepted this with a grunt. "We need more people. The briefing room will be hostile territory. Haskell has allies among the officers, and Renfro will have security position to remove you the moment you speak." "I know someone," Lonnie said. "Lieutenant O'Yelleran. His best friend died in Yemen. The lieutenant who has been walking around like a ghost for 6 months? He deserves to know the truth, and he deserves the chance to do something about it." They found O'Yelleran in bachelor officers' quarters, staring at a wall covered with photographs. His best friend smiled from a dozen frames, frozen in moments that would never repeat. He did not look surprised when Whitmore and Lonnie appeared at his door. "I wondered when someone would come," he said. "I have been asking questions about Yemen for months. Nobody wants to answer." Lonnie told him. She told him about the body armor, the suppressed warnings, the emails that proved Haskell knew. She told him about the contract approval scheduled for tomorrow morning and the detention order that would silence her before she could speak. O'Yelleran listened without interrupting. When she finished, his eyes held something she recognized. The cold clarity of a man who had found a target for grief that had been searching for direction. "What do you need me to do?" "Be in that briefing room tomorrow. When I present the evidence, Haskell will try to have me removed. I need officers who will demand to hear the truth." He nodded once. Marcus died, trusting his equipment. "If someone in our own chain of command is responsible, I will stand in front of a firing squad to see them answer for it." Across the base, in the flag officer quarters, Admiral Vernon Haskell reviewed his remarks for tomorrow's briefing. The contract approval was a formality. The signatures were already promised. In 3 months, he would have his 3rd star, and the Yemen incident would be buried so deep that archaeologists would not find it. His phone rang. "Renfro, the detention order is ready, Admiral. Security will take her at 0600. "Good. Make sure it is quiet. No scenes. I want her off this base before anyone asks questions." He ended the call and returned to his remarks, polishing phrases that would never be spoken. In the morning, everything would proceed exactly as planned. He had no idea that 3 people were awake in the darkness, preparing to tear his world apart. The hours crawled toward dawn. Lonnie sat in her quarters, unable to sleep, reviewing the evidence one final time. The emails, the metadata, the chain of decisions that had killed 4 men and would kill more if she failed. Her tablet showed the photographs she kept in the locked folder. Webb, Okonkwo, Chun, Vega, for faces that would never age, never see their children grow, never know that someone had fought to give their deaths meaning. "I'm sorry it took so long," she whispered. "But tomorrow, everyone will know." Outside, the sky began to lighten. The briefing was in 4 hours. The detention team would arrive in 2. Everything she had worked for, everything she had risked, came down to what happened next. Building 624 hummed with the controlled energy of important men preparing to make important decisions. The briefing room filled steadily as 0800 approached, officers claiming seats according to rank and service branch, while enlisted personnel lined the walls. 47 people gathered to witness the final approval of contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Admiral Haskell stood at the front, reviewing his notes with the satisfied expression of a man whose victory was already assured. Renfro had confirmed the detention team was in position. Chief Kasongo would be in custody within the hour, her accusations buried alongside her career. Master Chief Whitmore entered through the side door and took position near the back, his presence unremarkable among the senior enlisted observers. Lieutenant Commander Solheim sat in the second row, her JAG insignia catching the light as she arranged documents on her lap. Lieutenant O'Yelleran stood against the wall with the other junior officers, his expression carefully neutral. The clock showed 0755. Haskell began his opening remarks. Trident Forge objectives. Inter-service cooperation. The importance of maintaining readiness through properly equipped forces. His voice carried the polish of 1,000 briefings, smooth and confident and utterly convinced of its own authority. He transitioned to equipment procurement, new contracts with trusted vendors, rigorous testing protocols, full confidence in the supply chain. The side door opened. Lonnie walked into the briefing room with the measured pace of someone who belonged exactly where she was. She wore service dress blues, every crease sharp, every ribbon aligned. Her face showed nothing but professional attention. Haskell stopped mid-sentence. His eyes found her, and his expression flickered through surprise, confusion, and settling fury in the space of a heartbeat. Chief Kasongo. His voice cut across the room. You're not authorized to be in this briefing. Admiral, I have intelligence relevant to the equipment contracts under discussion. I request permission to present my findings. The room shifted. Officers exchanged glances. This was not protocol. Support personnel did not interrupt flag officer briefings to request presentation time. Haskell's smile returned, thin and sharp. Your clearances are under review. You have no standing to present anything. My clearances are current, Admiral. I verified them this morning through Naval Special Warfare Command. Lonnie's voice carried to every corner of the room. The intelligence I possess directly impacts the safety of operators who will use the equipment you are proposing to approve. Murmurs rippled through the assembled officers. A Marine raider colonel leaned forward with sudden interest. A SEAL captain frowned at the disruption to expected proceedings. Haskell's jaw tightened. Security, remove this person from the briefing. Renfro moved from his position near the door, but Whitmore stepped into his path. The two senior enlisted faced each other, neither willing to give ground. Admiral, Lieutenant Commander Solheim, spoke from her seat, her voice carrying legal weight. If the chief has intelligence relevant to equipment safety, Navy regulations require that it be heard before contract approval. Failure to consider relevant safety information could constitute negligence. The word hung in the air. Negligence. A career-ending accusation wrapped in procedural language. Haskell calculated. 47 witnesses. A JAG officer citing regulations. Refusing to hear her would look like he had something to hide. 5 minutes, he said. Present your intelligence, Chief. Then you will be escorted out. Lonnie moved to the front of the room. She connected her device to the display system and brought up the first document. 6 months ago, 4 DevGru operators were killed during an operation in Yemen. The official cause of death was enemy fire. The actual cause was catastrophic failure of ceramic body armor plates manufactured by Aegis Defense Solutions. The room went still. She advanced to the next slide. Procurement records showing the contract award. Inspection reports that had been falsified. Testing data that revealed structural defects in the ceramic composite. These plates were known to be defective before they were issued to operators. Warnings were filed through proper channels. Those warnings were suppressed. Haskell's face had gone pale. This is speculation. Unfounded accusations from a disgruntled analyst with a personal vendetta. Lonnie did not pause. The warnings were suppressed by direct order. I have the communications that prove it. She brought up the email chain. The room watched as the correspondence appeared on screen. Zinda, Rear Admiral Vernon Haskell. Recipient, Director of Procurement. Subject, Aegis ceramic plate testing concerns. The content was damning. Explicit instructions to bury the safety reports. Acknowledgement of the risks. Acceptance of those risks as the cost of maintaining contractor relationships. The Admiral knew, Lonnie said. He knew the armor was defective. He ordered the warning suppressed. And 4 operators died because of that decision. Silence crashed through the room like a physical force. Haskell stood frozen for 3 seconds. Then something broke behind his eyes. The political calculation, the careful mask, the decades of practice control, all of it shattered in an instant. He strode toward her, his face contorted with rage. "You have no idea what you have done," he said, his voice low and shaking. "No idea who you're dealing with." The room watched, paralyzed, as the Admiral closed the distance between them. The strike came without warning. Haskell's hand connected with her face, the sound sharp and sudden in the silent room. Lonnie's head turned with the impact. Her cheek burned. 47 people watched a flag officer assault an enlisted service member in front of witnesses. 3 seconds of absolute stillness. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The room existed in a frozen moment of collective disbelief, minds struggling to process what they had just witnessed. Haskell's rage had consumed his judgment. He saw only the woman who had destroyed him, the evidence on the screen, the career ending in real time. His hand rose again. Lonnie moved, not like an analyst, not like support staff, not like anything these operators had ever seen from someone wearing her uniform. She redirected his arm at the elbow, using his momentum to pull him off balance. Her other hand found the nerve cluster beneath his jaw, a precise strike, controlled force, exactly enough pressure to buckle his knees without causing permanent damage. The Admiral went down. Renfro launched himself forward, 260 pounds of former SEAL, reaching for the woman who had just dropped his commanding officer. Behind him, another security aide moved to flank. 8 seconds. Lonnie stepped inside Renfro's reach, negating his size advantage. She trapped his wrist, rotated his arm against the joint, and swept his legs. He hit the ground hard, his weapon hand pinned beneath her knee. The second aide swung wide. She ducked under his arm, drove her palm into his solar plexus, and followed with a controlled takedown that left him gasping on the floor beside his partner. 8 seconds. 2 trained security personnel neutralized. An Admiral on his knees. The room remained frozen. Lonnie stood in the center of the chaos she had created, breathing controlled, stance balanced, eyes tracking every potential threat in her peripheral vision. She did not look like a chief petty officer anymore. She looked like exactly what she was. "Stay down, Admiral." Haskell stared up at her, blood trickling from where he had bitten his lip during the fall. His eyes showed something she had never seen in them before. "Fear." "What?" he stammered. "What are you?" The question hung unanswered. Around the room, 47 people struggled to reconcile what they had just witnessed with everything they thought they knew about the woman standing before them. Master Chief Whitmore stepped forward, his voice cutting through the paralysis. "Everyone stay exactly where you are." He moved to position himself between Lonnie and the rest of the room, not to restrain her, but to establish order. "Mung," he addressed Solheim. "I believe you need to witness this formally." Lieutenant Commander Solheim rose from her seat, her legal training overriding her shock. She approached with the careful movements of someone entering an active crime scene. "Chief Kasongo," she said, "are you prepared to make a formal statement regarding the evidence you have presented?" "Yes, ma'am." "And regarding the assault committed against you by Admiral Haskell?" "Yes, ma'am." Solheim turned to face the room. "As the senior legal officer present, I am formally noting that Admiral Vernon Haskell struck an enlisted service member in front of multiple witnesses. I am also noting that the evidence presented by Chief Kasongo appears to document serious criminal conduct related to the deaths of 4 naval special warfare operators." She looked at Haskell, still on his knees, his perfect uniform disheveled and his political future crumbling around him. "Admiral, you have the right to remain silent." Anything you say can be used against you in a court-martial proceeding. O'Yelleran pushed through the crowd of stunned officers. His eyes were fixed on the email still displayed on the screen. The evidence that explained why his best friend had died. Marcus, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. His name was Marcus Webb. He had a daughter. Lonnie met his eyes. I know. I was in the TOC when the call came in. I tried to get QRF to them in time. You were there? I have been there for 8 years, Lieutenant. In places your file will never show. Doing things that officially never happened. The revelation rippled through the room. Officers and operators who had dismissed her, walked past her, treated her as furniture, all of them recalculating everything they thought they knew. Renfro struggled beneath her knee. She increased pressure on his wrist until he stopped. The Admiral told me you were a disgruntled analyst. He grunted. That you had fabricated evidence. The Admiral lied to you, Senior Chief. Just like he lied to everyone else. She released him and stepped back, allowing him to rise. He looked at Haskell, then at the evidence on the screen, then at the woman who had just put him on the ground with the efficiency of someone who had done it 100 times before. Who the hell are you? Whitmore answered for her. She is one of the most decorated operators DevGru has never officially acknowledged. And you just tried to assault her. The room absorbed this information. SEALs who had served for decades exchanged glances of disbelief. Marine raiders stared at the compact woman who had dismantled 2 security personnel in the time it took to draw breath. Haskell finally found his voice. This is absurd. She is an analyst. A paper pusher. I want her arrested. Admiral, Solheim said coldly, you are in no position to demand anything. You assaulted a service member, and you're implicated in the deaths of 4 operators. The only person being arrested today is you. The words landed like hammer blows. Haskell's face went gray as the reality of his situation finally penetrated. His career was over. His freedom was in question. And the woman he had tried to destroy was standing over him, untouched and unbroken. The briefing room churned with barely contained chaos. Officers spoke in urgent clusters. Security personnel stood uncertain, their chain of command suddenly unclear. At the front of the room, Admiral Haskell remained on his knees, blood drying on his chin, watching his world collapse in real time. This is mutiny, he said, but his voice had lost its authority. I'm a flag officer. I demand respect. Whitmore stepped forward. You are a flag officer who just struck an enlisted service member in front of 47 witnesses, Admiral. Respect is earned. Solheim moved to the display terminal, her legal training taking over. Chief Kasongo, I need you to formally transfer custody of this evidence to me as the senior JAG representative present. Lonnie disconnected her device and handed it to the lieutenant commander. Everything is there. The original emails, the metadata trail, procurement records, inspection reports. All of it. Solheim scrolled through the files, her expression growing harder with each document. She looked up at the assembled officers. What I am seeing here constitutes prima facie evidence of conspiracy to suppress safety information, obstruction of justice, and potentially negligent homicide. She turned to Haskell. Admiral, I am placing you under formal investigation pending court-martial proceedings. You cannot do this. Haskell's voice cracked. Do you know who I am? Do you know who my connections are? A Marine Raider colonel stood from his seat. Right now, Admiral, your connections are watching you bleed on the floor after assaulting a woman half your size. He turned to the other officers. I think we all know what we saw here today. The political calculus shifted visibly. Officers who had nodded along to Haskell's briefings now distanced themselves with careful steps and averted eyes. A Navy captain who had been scheduled to co-sign the equipment contracts quietly gathered his papers and moved toward the door. Nobody leaves this room. Solheim's voice cut through the movement. Everyone present is a witness to both the assault and the evidence presented. I will need statements from all of you. Lonnie moved to the display and brought up additional documents. There's more. Aegis Defense Solutions is owned by a holding company controlled by the Admiral's brother-in-law. Payments were routed through offshore accounts to obscure the connection. This was not negligence. This was corruption. The evidence spread across the screen. Financial records, corporate filings, a web of shell companies designed to hide the relationship between a flag officer and the contractor whose defective products he had approved. O'Yelleran stepped forward, his voice steady despite the emotion beneath it. 4 men died because of this. 4 operators who trusted their equipment and their chain of command. He faced the room. Marcus Webb, Terence Okonkwo, David Chun, Alejandro Vega. Those are their names. They deserve to be remembered. The names hung in the air. For men who had given everything, betrayed by the system they served. A SEAL commander Lonnie did not recognize spoke up. I served with Okonkwo in Afghanistan. Best breacher I ever worked with. His voice was thick. If what you're showing us is true, then the Admiral does not deserve a court-martial. He deserves worse. Haskell finally struggled to his feet, his uniform disheveled, his dignity shattered. You are all making a terrible mistake. This woman is lying. She is a disgruntled analyst with a vendetta. She has no credibility. Whitmore pulled out the satellite phone. That brings us to the final piece. He dialed a number and activated the speaker function. The room fell silent as the call connected. This is Captain Ezekiel Oduya, United States Navy, currently assigned to Special Operations Command, Tampa. The voice carried the weight of decades in special warfare. I understand there is some question about Chief Kasongo's credentials. Haskell went pale. In 2016, I created an unofficial program to cross-train exceptional female support personnel as operators, Oduya continued. Chief Kasongo was one of 3 women selected. She completed the full DevGru qualification pipeline and has deployed on 23 combat operations in roles that were never officially acknowledged. Her operator status is fully verified. Her combat record is exemplary. The room absorbed this information. Everything they had assumed about the woman standing before them restructured itself around this new reality. Captain Oduya, Solheim said, "Are you prepared to provide official documentation of Chief Kasongo's status? I am transmitting her complete service record to your secure terminal now, Lieutenant Commander, including operations that have never appeared in any official file." Haskell stared at the phone as if it had personally betrayed him. His lips moved, but no sound emerged. The man who had built a career on political connections and buried secrets had finally run out of both. Lonnie watched him without satisfaction. She had not done this for vengeance. She had done it for 4 men who could not speak for themselves. "Admiral," she said quietly, "you had a choice. You could have reported the defective armor. You could have saved 4 lives. Instead, you protected your contractor and your career. That choice brought you here." Haskell met her eyes. For a moment, something human flickered beneath the arrogance and fear. Then it was gone, replaced by the cold calculation of a man already planning his legal defense. "All my attorney," he said. Solheim nodded to 2 junior officers. "Escort the Admiral to temporary detention. He is not to communicate with anyone until JAG has completed initial processing." They led him toward the door. He had not looked back. The room exhaled. But Lonnie knew this was not over. The evidence was secured. The witnesses were documented. But justice moved slowly, and powerful men had powerful friends. The real fight was just beginning. The briefing room did not empty after Haskell was escorted out. Instead, the assembled officers and operators remained, drawn by something stronger than orders. They wanted to understand what they had witnessed. They wanted to know who Yolanda Kasongo really was. Commander Oduya's transmission continued to populate Solheim's secure terminal. Service records that had never existed in any official database. Operation reports with her name redacted, now restored. Commendations that had been classified at the highest levels. Solheim scrolled through the documents, her expression shifting from professional neutrality to something approaching awe. "Chief Kasongo," she said, "according to these records, you have deployed on 23 combat operations across 4 theaters. You have been directly credited with saving the lives of 17 operators. You have received 2 Bronze Stars and a Silver Star, none of which appear in your official file." The room absorbed this information. SEALs who had spent careers building reputations stared at the compact woman who had accomplished more than most of them while remaining completely invisible. A senior chief who had walked past her a dozen times without acknowledgement stepped forward. Mosul, 2019. I was on that operation. You were the one who cleared the upper floor when Torres went down. Lonnie nodded. I thought you were attached support. I never even learned your name. That was the point, Senior Chief. Another operator spoke up. Kandahar, the compound assault. Someone took out the machine gun nest from an impossible angle. We never figured out who made that shot. She did not confirm or deny, but her silence was answer enough. Around the room, operators began connecting memories. The analyst who was always present during briefings but never spoke. The support staffer who moved through secure areas with an ease that should have raised questions. The woman they had dismissed and ignored and underestimated for years. Master Chief Whitmore watched the recognition spread through the room. He had served alongside her without knowing, trusted her with intelligence without understanding, and only now grasped the full scope of what she had accomplished in silence. Solheim finished reviewing the documents and addressed the room. Based on the evidence presented, I am recommending immediate suspension of all contracts with Aegis Defense Solutions pending full investigation. The body armor program will be subject to comprehensive review. All units currently equipped with Aegis ceramic plates will be issued replacement equipment within 72 hours. The announcement carried weight. Operators who might have deployed with defective armor would now receive equipment they could trust. The system was responding, slowly, but responding. What about the families? O'Yelleran asked. Webb, Okonkwo, Chun, Vega. Their families still think they died in standard combat operations. Solheim paused. That decision is above my authority, but I will personally recommend that the families be informed of the true circumstances. They deserve to know their loved ones were betrayed, and they deserve to know that betrayal has been exposed. O'Yelleran nodded, his jaw tight with emotion he was struggling to contain. The crowd began to thin as officers departed to file reports and process what they had witnessed. But O'Yelleran remained, standing apart from the others, his eyes fixed on Lonnie. She approached him. You said you were in the TOC when the call came in, he said. You said you tried to get QRF to them in time. I did. What happened? She had carried this memory for 6 months. The radio traffic, the chaos, the desperate attempt to coordinate extraction for an element that was already being overrun. I tracked their position and vectored the quick reaction force, she said. But by the time we had authorization to launch, it was too late. The ambush was designed to delay our response. They knew our protocols. O'Yelleran's hands clenched at his sides. Marcus called me 2 days before that operation. He said something felt wrong. He said the intel seemed too clean. He was right. The operation was compromised. I flagged concerns in my analysis, but they were dismissed. By Haskell? By the command structure Haskell controlled. The connection landed hard. O'Yelleran had spent 6 months blaming himself for not being there, for not sensing danger, for not stopping his friend from walking into a trap. Now he understood the trap had been set far above his level. I want to testify, he said, at the court-martial. I want to stand in that room and tell them exactly what Marcus meant to everyone who served with him. You will have that chance, Lieutenant. He looked at her with something that might have been gratitude or might have been grief. Maybe both. Thank you for not letting them bury this, for fighting when everyone else gave up. She thought about the memorial wall, the names that were there and the names that were missing. They deserved better than silence. The room had nearly emptied. Solheim was coordinating with legal staff via secure communication. Junior officers were filing out to begin the paperwork that would transform this morning's chaos into official record. Whitmore appeared at her side. Hello, morning, Chief. She almost smiled. I have had worse. He laughed, a short bark that released tension he had been carrying for hours. I believe you have. They stood together in the aftermath, 2 warriors who had seen more than most and understood the cost of what had been achieved. What now? Whitmore asked. Lonnie looked at the empty screen where Haskell's contract approvals had been displayed. The evidence had been secured. The investigation had begun. But systems that allowed corruption to flourish did not change overnight. Now we make sure it never happens again." Whitmore nodded slowly. "That sounds like a longer fight than taking down one admiral." "It is." He considered this for a moment. "Good thing you're not fighting alone anymore." The morning sun streamed through the windows. Somewhere on the base, Haskell was being processed for detention. Somewhere in Tampa, Odia was preparing documentation that would formalize what had been hidden for years. And somewhere in 4 homes across America, families were about to learn the truth about why their loved ones never came home. The battle was won. The war continued. 2 days after the briefing room confrontation, Coronado had transformed. The ripples from Admiral Haskell's arrest spread outward through the naval special warfare community and beyond. Investigators descended on the base. Contractors who had enjoyed cozy relationships with procurement officers suddenly found their records under scrutiny. The system was waking up. Lonnie sat in a secure communication room, facing a screen that showed Captain Odia's weathered face from Tampa. "You certainly know how to make an entrance," Odia said. "Half the Pentagon is trying to figure out what to do with you. And the other half is trying to figure out what to do with me." He leaned back in his chair. "The shadow pipeline is no longer a secret, Kasongo. That presents certain complications." "What kind of complications?" "Some people want to formalize the program. Expand it. They see what you accomplished, and they want 100 more like you. Others want it buried. They see a liability, a policy violation that could embarrass the Navy." "And what do you want, sir?" Oduya considered the question. "I want the right people in the right positions, regardless of what chromosomes they carry. I want operators who can do things others cannot." He paused. "I want the program I created to become something official, something that cannot be erased when political winds shift. That could take years. It could. But you bought us time. What you did in that briefing room proved the concept better than any report I could write. A female operator, invisible for 8 years, who took down an admiral and exposed a conspiracy." He smiled slightly. "That is a compelling argument." The conversation shifted to logistics. Her reassignment was being processed. New orders would arrive within 24 hours. The specifics remained classified, but Odia hinted at a training role, something that would leverage her experience to develop the next generation. After the call ended, she walked across the base to the training compound. The atmosphere had changed in ways both subtle and significant. Operators who had ignored her for years now nodded in acknowledgement. Some stopped to introduce themselves, to share missions they had been on together without knowing it, to offer the respect that had been withheld for so long. The training cage was active when she arrived. A group of junior SEALs were working close-quarters combat drills under the supervision of an instructor who looked up as she entered. "Chief Kasongo." The instructor's tone carried invitation rather than formality. "My boys have been asking about that takedown technique you used on Renfro. Any chance you could demonstrate?" She had spent 8 years avoiding exactly this kind of visibility. But that chapter was closed now. She stepped onto the mat. For the next hour, she worked with the junior operators, demonstrating techniques that blended traditional combatives with methods she had learned in places that did not officially exist. They were eager students, competitive and skilled, and they treated her not as a curiosity, but as what she was. A peer, an operator, one of them. Afterward, sweating and tired in the good way that came from honest physical work, she received word that Renfro had agreed to cooperate with investigators. His testimony would be crucial in establishing the full scope of Haskell's corruption. In exchange for leniency, he was providing names, dates, and documentation that would bring down others who had participated in the cover-up. The net was widening. Justice was slow, but it was moving. That evening, she made a call she had been putting off for 6 months. The face that appeared on her screen belonged to Elena Webb, widow of Marcus Webb. She looked tired in the way that grief made people tired, worn down by absence and unanswered questions. "Chief Kasongo." Elena's voice was cautious. "The Navy told me you wanted to speak with me." "Mrs. Webb, thank you for taking my call. They told me you were there. When Marcus died, they said you tried to help." Lonnie felt the weight of that day pressing against her chest. "I was in the Tactical Operations Center. I coordinated the Quick Reaction Force. We tried to reach them in time. But you could not." "No, ma'am. We could not." Elena was quiet for a moment. The investigators told me what really happened. About the body armor. About the Admiral who knew. She looked directly into the camera. Is it true? Did someone in our own military get my husband killed? Yes, ma'am. It is true. The confirmation landed hard. Elena's composure cracked, tears spilling down cheeks that had surely shed thousands already. He trusted them, she whispered. He trusted the equipment and the leadership and the whole damn system. He did. And the man responsible will answer for that betrayal. He is in custody right now. He will face court-martial. Elena wiped her eyes. Will that bring Marcus back? Will it let him see his daughter grow up? No, ma'am. Nothing can do that. Then why? Why did you fight so hard to expose this? Lonnie thought about the memorial wall, the names that were missing, the silence that had protected the guilty. Because he deserved better than a lie, she said. Because you and your daughter deserve to know that his death was not meaningless. It was murder, and the people responsible will pay for it. Elena Webb looked at her through the screen, measuring the woman who had fought for her husband's memory. Thank you, she said finally, for not letting them bury the truth. The call ended. Lonnie sat in the darkness of her quarters, carrying the weight of promises she intended to keep. Her tablet chimed. New orders, transmitted through secure channels. She read them twice, then began to pack. 6 months later, the verdict came down. Rear Admiral Vernon Haskell, formerly of the United States Navy, was found guilty on 17 counts including conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and negligent homicide. The court-martial had lasted 3 weeks, featuring testimony from dozens of witnesses and evidence that painted a damning picture of corruption at the highest levels. When the sentence was read, Haskell stood in his dress uniform for the last time, stripped of his rank insignia, facing 23 years in military prison. The families of Webb, Okonkwo, Chun, and Vega sat in the gallery. They watched the man who had killed their loved ones led away in handcuffs. It was not enough. It would never be enough. But it was justice, and justice was better than silence. Aegis Defense Solutions ceased operations 2 months after the trial began. Federal investigators had uncovered a pattern of fraud and negligence that extended far beyond the body armor contracts. The company's executives faced their own charges. The defense industry took notice. Corners that had been cut for decades were suddenly being examined with fresh eyes. The body armor program was rebuilt from the ground up. New contractors, new testing protocols, new accountability measures. Operators who deployed now wore equipment that had been verified by people who understood that lives depended on every stitch and every plate. And the shadow pipeline became something more than a secret. Captain Ezekiel Odia stood before a congressional committee and testified about the program he had created. He spoke about the women who had completed training that broke most men, who had deployed on operations that tested the limits of human capability, who had served in silence because policy had not yet caught up with reality. The committee listened. Some were skeptical. Others were convinced. In the end, they voted to authorize a formal integration program, properly funded and officially sanctioned. The first class of candidates arrived at a training facility that did not appear on any public map. They came from across the services, men and women who had been identified as exceptional. They did not know what awaited them. They only knew they had been selected for something that would change their lives. Chief Petty Officer Yolanda Kasongo stood at the edge of the training ground, watching them assemble. Her role here was not official. Her name did not appear on any roster. She was listed simply as an advisor, a consultant brought in to assist with specialized instruction. But everyone who mattered knew who she was and what she had accomplished. The candidates lined up in the morning sun, nervous energy radiating from bodies that had not yet learned to contain it. Instructors barked commands. The familiar rhythm of military training began its grinding work. Lonnie watched from a distance, remembering her own first day. The fear, the determination, the absolute certainty that she would prove herself or die trying. Her story was taught here, though not by name. The instructors spoke of an analyst who had been invisible for 8 years, an operator who had saved 17 lives without recognition, A woman who had taken down an admiral and exposed a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of command. They told the story as a lesson in persistence, in courage, in the power of refusing to be defined by others' expectations. The candidates did not know the woman in the story was watching them. One figure caught her attention, a young petty officer standing slightly apart from the others, her posture rigid with the particular tension of someone who felt out of place. The male candidates around her moved with the easy confidence of men who had never been told they did not belong. She moved like someone who had heard that message her entire life. Lonnie walked toward her. The young woman noticed her approach and straightened further, clearly expecting criticism or dismissal. "First day?" Lonnie asked. "Yes, Chief." "What is your name?" "Petty Officer Abrams, Chief." Lonnie studied her. The young woman held her gaze, refusing to look away despite her obvious nerves. "Good." Fear was natural. Surrender was not. "They do not see you yet," Lonnie said, gesturing toward the other candidates who had barely acknowledged the young woman's presence. "That is fine. That changes nothing about who you are or what you can do." Abrams blinked, surprise breaking through her careful composure. "Yes, Chief. I was invisible for 8 years, Petty Officer. I served alongside operators who never knew my name. I saved lives and took lives, and none of it appeared in any official record." She paused, letting the words land. "But I knew who I was. Every single day I knew, and when the time came to prove it, I was ready." The young woman's eyes sharpened with understanding. Something shifted in her posture, fear giving way to something harder and more determined. "How do I get ready, Chief?" Lonnie almost smiled. "You show up. You work harder than everyone else. You learn everything they teach you, and then you learn more. And when they tell you that you cannot do something, you do it anyway." She turned toward the training area where the instructors were organizing the first evolution of the day. "Come on, Abrams. Let us see what you are made of." They walked together across the compound, the veteran and the candidate, the past and the future. Behind them, the sun rose higher over the Pacific, casting long shadows across ground that had witnessed the transformation of countless warriors. Somewhere, 4 names had finally been added to a memorial wall. Webb, Okonkwo, Chun, Vega. They would not be forgotten. Their deaths had meaning now, had sparked a change that would ripple through the military for generations. And somewhere, a young woman who felt invisible was taking her first steps toward becoming something extraordinary. The cycle continued. The mission endured. And those who had been underestimated would always find a way to rise. If this story moved you, drop a comment and share your favorite moment, or tell us about a time when someone proved they were more than others assumed. Your stories remind us that hidden strength exists everywhere, waiting for its moment to emerge.